let it go.
Couldn't see the problem though. Could not see the problem. I just felt like you are all horrible people. My job here, I have one job, and that is to protect myself from all of you and to protect my child from all of you. 2 assignments: protect myself, protect my child. That's it. As time progressed, I knew there was more for my life. Funny enough, while I was going through everything that I was going through, all the darkness, all the spiraling out of control, I was helping people. Crazy. I was helping people. I was speaking life into people. I was encouraging people. I was pulling other people out of their darkness while I was still in darkness, which I think about now and I'm like, man, your calling, you cannot hide away from it, regardless of what you're going through. Because I was always on the phone and always speaking to people and encouraging them, have faith, and I wasn't there. I knew I needed more though. I knew like I said, my life is a compilation of miracles. Back up to when I was 4, with everything happening, that was because the enemy was upset. The enemy was mad at me, was mad at the purpose that God had for me. When I was 4 years old, I knew, I was convicted enough to know that I wanted to be a Christian. At 4, I begged my mother to allow me to get baptized. I had begged my then godfather to baptize me. He was a pastor of the church. I begged anyone that had ears to hear. I was pleading my case. I wanted to be baptized at 4 years old. I knew at that age that my purpose was to serve God. And so I think that's what ticked the enemy off. Like, no, no, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen the way you think it is. And so I think that's where everything started. Then when I was 17 again, I hit another roadblock. It was before the incident where I was arrested, but I hit another mark, or maybe 15. I think I was 15 when I realized again that I needed God. I knew of God. I didn't know God personally, but I knew deep down inside me, I knew there was a calling on my life. I knew I needed to be there in that space. I needed to be connected. And so I got baptized again. I figured, okay, maybe I need to get baptized because I don't remember my baptism when I was 4. That again was short-lived because I knew God was calling me, but I just wasn't there yet. And so my early 20s was kind of like that, kind of trying to find my way, met the wrong people. I was attracted obviously to the wrong men. I was still attracted to the bad guys. I still felt the desire to have someone who would protect me. It took me long enough to realize that the real protection that I needed was God's protection. But I met men who were bad guys, but that's what I needed. I'll tell you this though. When God is calling you, I think he calls a couple of times and he allows you. He's so merciful that he will wait for you. He will call and he will wait for you to answer. But then there comes a point where he's like, okay, so you're not going to answer? All right, check this out. And that's what I think started to happen in my life. I got married, and I would have said this before my podcast. I had no business getting married when I did. I knew I loved him. I knew he loved me. But we were 2 broken people. My husband was broken. He needed to heal. And so did I. And so I was making mention of it. I think last week I was saying to someone that there was an incident that occurred, and I called my husband to come to my rescue, and he showed up and he just started beating them. Just beating them. I was scared because I remember thinking like, man, what if they have a gun and they shoot at him and miss and hits me? He was also a broken man. God bless his soul. He's no longer here. But he was broken. So imagine 2 broken people together. When we got angry at each other, we got angry, and that's where you knew. And I think deep down he knew that we needed to heal, because he would come back and he'd be like, babe, you know, I know that when we get mad at each other, it's not because of what happened, but because of something that was before, something that wasn't dealt with. And he knew that, but we couldn't apply it. I'll not speak much on that, but we needed to heal. In 2018, I remember one night I was doing craft. I was making some stuff and I felt a sharp pain in my back. And the pain was like really sharp, but it went away. Everything was good. I went to work the following day. I remember sitting at the desk and I did this and I couldn't take a deep breath. It was this pain that I felt at the time. It felt like my side to the back. I realized that within minutes, I could no longer take a deep breath. That was the beginning of what felt like one of the hardest periods of my life. The following day, I ended up at the emergency room because the pain was so severe. I gave birth to a child, and I don't remember labor being that painful. The pain I had in my lung, I remember saying, I was praying like, God, I don't know what this is. And I remember saying to my husband, call my mother, ask her to pray for me. And I remember my mother came on the phone and I heard her voice and I needed to hear her voice. And that was so reassuring. I'm like, okay, I know my mother is a woman of God. I said to her, Mom, I'm dying. I remember saying that. That's all I could have gotten out. I said, Mom, I'm dying. And I remember thinking like, what about my daughter? And so I went to the hospital and my daughter was on my mind the entire time. Like, man, my child is so young. She's going to have to bury her mother. And that I didn't even care that I was in pain. I didn't care what was happening. I was just like, man, my child is going to know what it feels like to grow up without a parent. By this time, I was a single mother, right? All she had was me. And I'm like, God, come on. And so, and I went to the hospital. They controlled the pain. I did a whole bunch of tests. And the doctor came back and said, they found that I had pulmonary embolism. I was like, what's that? They put the x-ray up and they started to show me. They're like, okay, this is your lung. That dark area that you're seeing, that smoky shaded looking area, which is my lower right lobe. He said to me, that is the damage on your lung. You have blood clots, 2 blood clots in your lung. And that's restricting your air supply and your blood supply. That's what made you feel that way. So he said to me, when you felt like you were dying, you were dying. They were trying to see what was the course of action to take. But somehow I knew, based on the conversations, I overheard the conversations between the doctors and my husband and my mother and the doctors. And I knew something wasn't right. I just knew it. Deep down, I knew. I ended up getting pneumonia on the same lung. The same lung. Based on the way that they were treating me, I realized, okay, this wasn't good. And all I could think about was my daughter. And I remember, I think I asked my best friend to print a photo of her for me to put it in the hospital room, because I felt like if there was ever a reason I was going to fight to live, it was going to be for her. And so I needed that photo there. One day the pain got so bad that I was praying. All I could do was pray. I cried and cried and cried, and all I could do was pray. And I'm like, God, just take me. I do not want to live like this. I do not want to feel this pain. I cannot spend my life feeling this kind of pain. And I begged God. I'm like, God, just take me, save me from this. He didn't, because he had a purpose for my life. I'm still here, still here, because he had a greater purpose from whatever I had for myself. I remember laying on the hospital bed and I prayed and I said, God, if I make it out of this, I will serve you. I will give my life over completely to you. And he saved me. I started a foundation after that because I felt like I wasn't fulfilling my purpose. And so I started a foundation right after, before I recovered, I started a foundation. But did I surrender my life to God? No, no. That was where I think that was the worst period of my life. Man, why are humans like that? Instead of surrendering my life completely over to Him like I had promised, I spiraled out of control. By this, I realized I was starting to have a drug problem. They had given me morphine, Percocet, you name it, painkillers. And those were to control the pain. But then I started to realize that they numbed me and I needed to feel numbed. And so it took me a while. Thank God I did not go too deep in to realize that I was no longer taking the pain meds just for pain. I was taking it to numb me. So yes, I was sticking within the time, but I felt like I could have gone a little bit more. I could have endured the pain a little more, but I was like, nah, I need to be numbed. And I think that me being ill and not being able to function some ways, and I got a long list of things that I couldn't do. In case you don't know, if you have a blood clot that have moved to your lung, you now have the risk, especially if that clot is still in your body, it hasn't completely dissolved. The risk was if it went to my heart to cause a heart attack, or it would go to my brain to cause an aneurysm. So the list of things that I couldn't do were endless. And I think that definitely caused issues with my husband and I. I was numb for the most part. There was no intimacy because I was just not interested. I was angry at him. It was just crazy. And so that was the beginning of the end of the marriage, I would say. Everything else added, we needed to heal, plus all this. And I started to feel like, I needed to go back to Jamaica. I didn't feel like there was home. Like I felt I was sick and I couldn't go to work. And I felt like I had no community there. I was like, all my friends are, I felt like I needed to be in Jamaica. And of course, that would have been a conflict of interest. My husband was a U.S. citizen. How was that going to work, right? I don't know. But yeah, that was the beginning of the end. But of course, he was the father that my daughter knew. And so we were still really close for her. He called her his daughter. She called him daddy. And so that wasn't going to be the complete end of us. But as far as the closeness of our relationship, when I tell you that God will do whatever it takes to get your attention, take it from me. Take it from me. After that, I ended up with someone I had no business being with. I had no business because I knew. My friends told me. My mother told me the first time that she saw him, she said, I don't know. My aunt told me. My brother told me. I have a friend who straight up told me, if you are still with this man, we cannot communicate. We cannot be friends. I've had strangers say to me that this man was not for me. Strangers who knew of him or knew of me said, I don't see it. I can't see how you two are together. But I just felt like I needed to get something right. The signs were there clear as day. Everyone made it evident how they felt about him, about the relationship. I felt like, man, I cannot keep failing at things. I felt like a failure. Again, I had not done the work. I had not healed enough to know when it's time to let it go and walk away. Okay? I just felt like I had to prove myself. I had to prove that I could make something right. So I'm going to take this thing that I know isn't right, that God knows isn't right, that everyone else knows was not right, and I'm going to fix it. This is going to be a success story. I'm going to make magic with this. Wrong answer. Continued for a while and I tried to pour what I could into it. By this, I had learned to be emotional towards men. I had learned how to love. And so I felt like, okay, if I love him enough and if I fix him up enough, I'm going to show them that I could do it. I got pregnant. My first thought was like, okay, I always did want another child, but did I want another child with this man? But I thought, well, now I'm definitely going to have to make it work. Now they'll have to accept him because we're having a child together, right? God is going to have to shuffle things around to make space, make room for this. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. I remember one night I was laying down and I was about to rub my belly. And it's like, a thought came to me like, why would you do that? What if? What if? A few weeks after that, I started to have some really sharp pains. Being a mother, I knew, already having a child, I knew that these sharp pains that I was feeling wasn't anything good. I ended up going to the hospital and they identified what they thought was the problem and they thought they resolved it. I think it was a week after that. He was traveling and fortunately I had a friend who was at the house at the time with me and my daughter. And I remember one night the pain came back, this time with vengeance. And I was thinking, oh no, could not bear this. I was sweating. I don't know about you, but I hate stomach pains, but that was really bad. And I called, I could barely even speak, but I got my friend's attention and I said, you know what, can you bring me some tea? You know, if you are Jamaican, you know the faith that we have in tea, especially ginger tea. That is the universal cure for everything. If you have ginger tea, you don't need anything else. That's what I thought. I had the tea and I threw up. I'm like, see, knew it, just needed some tea. I laid on my stomach because I was like, okay, that made the pain feel a little bit, I applied pressure, it felt better. I went to sleep. God's grace. It's by God's grace. You know that song? It was God's grace. All things through Christ Jesus. Trust me. I slept like a baby that night. Woke up the following day still in pain. I managed to shower and I was laying on the sofa. Fell asleep again. This time the pain woke me up and I felt paralyzed. From my waist down, I could not move my feet. That's how much pain I was in. I felt like someone had cut me in half. And I knew something was wrong. And I said to my friend, I have to go to the hospital. We called someone to assist me to the hospital. At this point, she's going to come. My daughter's going to have to come because she's going to assist me there. And who's going to take care of my kid? When the person came to get me into the car, I could not move. I remember having to slouch over like this, like at an angle. The pain was ridiculous. Fast forward, we go to the hospital, they rush me in emergency. Now they have to figure out, of course, now I would have told them I was here the week before, that I'm pregnant, all that. They rush me in to do an ultrasound and I see the lady going like she was a trainee and she's looking like, and she said, can you hold on a second? Let me, she went and she got the other guy, which was maybe the person training her. And the guy said to me, how long have you been having this pain? And I said, well, I've been in pain since last night. He said, what time last night? And I told him. He said, you've been bleeding internally since last night. Lost a lot of blood. You've been bleeding internally. But God was on the case, right? You know that cartoon Chase is on the case? Well, Jesus was on the case. I bled out from about after 10, the pain started, until I got to the hospital after 2 or after 3. And I was bleeding internally all night. Meanwhile, I'm bleeding internally and I'm sleeping like a baby. So had God not had a plan for my life, I would have just bled to death in my sleep. Internal bleeding, I would have just not been here. But again, when God has a purpose for your life, nothing can stop the purpose. Not the plans of the enemy. Sometimes we think that the things that are happening to us, that has happened to me so many times. We're like, God, where are you in all this? Why did you allow this? Sometimes we tend to think that God is the one who does these things to us. We feel like I'm serving God. I'm showing up. Even as Christians, we think like, God, I'm praying. I'm reading my Bible. I'm doing the right thing. I'm being the person that you want me to be. How could you do this? Sometimes God will allow things to happen. It's like Job. God did not do all those things to Job. He did not kill all his children. He did not give him illnesses and cause him to lose all his cattle and all that. But he allowed it because the purpose that he was about to birth out of Job would have to come after the experiences that Job had. And so sometimes when you're going through your Job moment and you feel like, where is God in all this? How could God have forsaken me? Remember that what he has for you, the plans that he has for you, has to be brought to life. And the only way that can be brought to life is by the experiences that we overcome daily, the things that we go through that we feel like we're at the edge. I feel like God allows us to go to the edge just so he can prove to us, like, see, I can reach out and I can pull you back at any time. He will watch you going and watch the enemy pushing you, and he will say, no, I'll wait until the last moment. You know why? Because when you're at the edge right there, when there's no one and there's nothing that can save you, and you feel like you cannot save yourself, when he pulls you back, you will have no doubt that it was the hand of God on your life. No doubt that it was God who was pulling you through all this, through the darkness, through the divorce, through the sexual abuse, through everything. You will know that it had to have been God. Because for me to sleep from 10 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock the following day while I was bleeding internally and not die, who else could it have been but God? There's no other explanation. There's no doctor who can explain it. The doctor could not explain it. But I went into surgery, found out, as a matter of fact, that I had an ectopic pregnancy. So I ended up losing my left fallopian tube, but I made it out of that. You know what ended up coming out of that too? Was me realizing that I had no business being in that relationship. I mean, I'm just thinking that God could have sent me a text. He could have sent me an email. I don't know. But for him to have to speak that loudly, jeez. But I heard, thank God I heard. But yeah, so when that happened, I spiraled again. So I remember just feeling like I couldn't even get that right. At that point, I definitely hated my body. I'm like, man, you had one job. And then I started comparing myself to women who had 5, 6, 7 children, and all the children came healthy and their body did not fail them. I felt like my body was a complete failure. Man, sometimes we can be so ungrateful, because I had a healthy child that I loved dearly. But there was this one thing that I felt like, man, why couldn't you get this right? I was grieving more for myself than the child, because I never really did get attached, because somewhere in my subconscious I knew that this wasn't how I wanted to have another child. This wasn't the person, he wasn't the father that I wanted for my child or my children to have. And so I wasn't grieving the loss of the child really, and I had to free myself, because sometimes people think that because you went through a particular situation that someone else went through, that you have to deal with it the same way. I wasn't grieving the child. I was grieving my body. I was grieving myself. Like, man, why couldn't you get this right? I felt like God had given up on me, like God had turned his back. I'm like, man, you couldn't even allow this. But no, he couldn't, because that was not his purpose for my life. He knew that what he had for me would be far greater than what I think that I could provide for myself. And so that was kind of the thing that pushed the relationship out the door. Fortunately, it turned out that after we separated, my daughter told me straight up that, Mom, oh, I'm so happy because I did not like him. Excuse me? Wow. She's like, yep, never did like him anyway. I'm like, okay, God, I see you. I remember my friends having to talk me off the ledge, you know, based on how I felt about myself, how I felt about my body. My mother had to be encouraging me, like, you know, what is for you, God will allow, but what isn't, you have to trust his timing. But I tell you what, guys, that was what pushed me back into church. I got so dark. I felt so dark, so down, so lonely, that I finally realized that not the partying. After I had thought that I healed enough from PE, I was out partying. 1 year of my life was the worst year of my life. I was at every single party. If you knew me then, you knew. I was at every single party. Places I had no business being. Places that my mother was like, what on earth are you doing? I was wearing clothing that I now look at them and I'm like, ugh, who are you? Right? That was when the devil had me like, hee-haw, get up, get up. right for an entire year, I was just going and going again. I was with the wrong person. I had attached myself to the wrong man. And let me tell you, if you are a believer, if you are trying to do the right thing, if it is your desire to serve God and actually walk a life upright, a life of righteousness, the person who leads you away from the kingdom of God is clearly not the person for you. You don't need your friends, your mom, your anyone to tell you. If the man that you choose, and I'm talking to women, men too, if the person that you choose brings you away from the love of God, if you have to go outside the love of God to get that person, you are going to have to stay outside the love of God to keep that person. And so that's what happened. I connected to the wrong man and I became the wrong woman. I was out partying, whatever. And God was like, you know what? Let me just put an end to this, like a real end to this. It ended up costing me because now I'm one fallopian tube short and I have a cesarean section scar, even though I gave birth to my daughter naturally. But hey, I had to learn, right? And apparently I was more stubborn than anyone else. But yeah, but that pushed me back into the arms of God. I knew that there was nothing that could satisfy me. There is nothing that could give me joy. I knew that there was no man, there was no friend, there was no party, there was no anything. I felt a burning desire to seek after God, to reach for Him, to serve Him, to have Him comfort me, because that's when I knew the father that I didn't grow up with, the negative experience that I had of a father. I knew that God was my heavenly Father, and that's the only place that I could go to find the joy that I was seeking. And so all that, around and around and around, I was running away from the will of God ever since I was in my teens, really here, there, It doesn't matter how long you run. If God wants you, if God is calling you, I just feel like He doesn't even chase you. I feel like He's just there like, okay, you'll be back. Yeah, you'll be back. I think an angel goes and says, God, you know that she's at this party again. Yeah, don't mind her. She has to come back. He just waits and He allows us to just go and we'll wreck ourselves and we'll do the worst things to ourselves. But He's like, you know what? I am your Father. I still love you. I still want the best for you. My plans for you are still good and not of evil. So you know what, my child? Whenever you are ready, come home. I think that was God, like, I think He had His arms open and He's like, when you're ready, I'm here. Come home. And I felt like, yeah, that's what I needed to do. I needed to go home. And I can tell you, this is my testimony, that it has not been easy. I got baptized again and I tried to do the right thing. It was hard for me, really hard, much harder at first, because I needed the right friends. I needed friends that wanted the same things that I wanted, friends that were seeking after the same things. I didn't have that. So while I had gotten baptized and while I was, reading the word, praying, trying to get close, it wasn't anything like it is now. I still had bad experiences after I recommitted my life to God, but I can tell you nothing as bad as what I experienced outside of the kingdom. My experiences before, the things that I went through, nothing that I have gone through, because it's not going to be easy. It's never an easy walk. I would be a hypocrite to sit here and say to you that once you commit your life to God, everything changes. I still struggle with depression. I'm still fighting with anxiety. Is it better now? Absolutely. But before, it was really bad. It still exists right now. I still have moments of doubt, like, are you sure you want to do this? But I can tell you what, the healing, when you heal, you'll see yourself in a whole new light. You'll see a version of you that you didn't even know existed after you have done what was necessary to heal, after you've done the work, after you've done the therapy, after you've sat with yourself, you've sat in stillness, you've trusted God with your life, you've trusted God with your heart, after you have poured out what was inside of you, after you have released, after you have given yourself a real chance at being happy, after you have given yourself the opportunity to forgive, to flourish, to grow. That is priceless. The peace of mind is something that it doesn't matter how much money you have. peace of mind. And that's what I got. That's what I have right now. So while I'm not a perfect Christian, I still have things that I struggle with. I still have days when I'm like, man, God, please just bear with me here. I'm still trying. I'm still growing. But I can tell you, nothing is as bad as it was outside of the love of God. I just felt like I needed to share my testimony to encourage you. It doesn't matter what you have been through. These were just parts of my story that I chose to share, and I did not want to be going on and on and on for days. These were what I felt were the highlights of my life. And where I am right now, I have so much love to give. I'm so open to receiving love. I can pour into others, and I can afford to allow others to pour into me. I can trust God with my life, knowing that, listen, the last time when I trusted myself, I was a mess, baby. So I know now that even when I cannot see things, even when I cannot see what He's doing, there's a song that says, even when I cannot see His hand, I can trust His heart. So that's my encouragement to you. I was coming home earlier, I was driving, and I kept listening to this song over and over. And the part of the song that really connects is when it says, if He had said it, then He will do it. He has a track record of keeping His word, and He is not about to stop doing it now. Now that, when God has made a promise to you, whether He made it to you or to your family or to your parents, He keeps His word. I would have received prophecies that reminded me that God keeps His word. That even when we run away and we forget that there was a word for our lives, and we forget that He has a purpose for our lives, and we forget that nothing about our existence is coincidental, nothing about our experience is by chance. It was all a part of the divine architecture of our life. Once we figure that out, we will realize that because He's a man of His word, He will still do what He said He will do, regardless of what you're experiencing right now, regardless of how broken you feel. God is not a God who is emotional enough to say, oh my God, well, she's going through that right now, so I'm going to just change my plan. His plans never change. So this is my reminder to you to hold on to His unchanging love. Hold on to that thing, that little burning desire to seek Him even when you are in your most desolate places. Because His plans for you are of good and not of evil. If you stayed for part 2 of my testimony, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with someone that needed this reminder that it doesn't matter what. He never changes. You change, your circumstances will change, your seasons will change, but God never changes. Don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.